You're listening to Ants Talk.
My next guest, life was changed forever when the events of 9/11 evolved in New York City. Rebecca was 23 and celebrating her first year anniversary of work at Morgan Stanley in Tower 2. She had just arrived to the lobby when the second plane hit. With the building shaking and crashing down around her, Becky had no idea what happened. I'm so thankful that Becky has offered her time to talk to us about that fateful day. Please welcome Becky. Hey, Becky, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. As we've already spoken about, you know that I'm obsessed with New York. So this story really affected me, and I'm sure as it has you.
Well, yes, and obviously I love New York too. I still live here, and I live downtown New York, and it's
I'm so jealous.
never even crossed my mind to. I'm very jealous where you live, except minus what's happening in the environment right now. But
well, once the fires stop, I'm always happy to swap.
Okay.
Maybe we could do a holiday in both.
Oh my gosh, this is such a good idea. All right, let's talk
right?
later business. We just struck up a Airbnb swap.
Yeah, exactly. So, Becky, can you tell us about your first memories of that day?
Yeah, it's always when I talk about this, and I'm sorry if I just redirect me if I get nervous. Sometimes I get nervous, and I suddenly forget what I'm saying. And I mean, I think this happens to a lot of people. It just happens to me like on a much more regular basis. But yeah, to me, when I think back, it's always the first 20 minutes that are the most critical and most sort of burned into my memory. I think because that's when, without consciously thinking, but I knew that my life was immediately in danger, or not that my life was immediate. It wasn't even like I had time to think about that. I just sort of, it was the end. I don't know if I processed like I'm about to die or something, but it just so that was the most life-changing moment, and the most, sort of I remember. And because it's so burned into my head, I remember it like I can feel it. Like my chest
I
is
can
like,
imagine.
Feel like, I was just 23, and it was my 1-year anniversary at Morgan Stanley. I just, graduated college in Boston the summer, just moved to New York that summer. I was only in New York a couple months. I loved it. And I loved I was on the 74th floor of
That
Tower
would have
2.
been amazing.
It was amazing. It was. And I was just there, I mean, exactly 1 year. And and I went to the restaurant. My boss had taken a couple of us up there like some weeks prior. So at least I got to do that once.
Yeah.
Windows of the World. Yeah. So you like, it's on the 100, whatever.
Funny enough, I actually have a menu from there.
You do?
Yeah. Like a pamphlet.
Man.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm haunted by the story of, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but it's like, when I start telling my story and I start thinking of the other people involved, because this is not about just, me at all.
No,
I just want to I feel like self-indulgent sometimes, like when I'm talking, even though I know that, sorry, this is like, I feel like I'm in therapy being like,
I also think that reliving them too, it's giving them a voice.
Yeah.
It's allowing them to be remembered. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
It took me a long, like we talked about a few minutes before. I think you might have like become way wiser than I have in general, and also way quicker than me. Like I'm just realizing that all this.
I am older.
Yeah, well, not that much. But I do now sort of give myself permission to talk about things and to know that it's in the same breath I'm thinking about the people that were around me that day.
Yeah.
There was a long time I couldn't even look at other people that had family members that were killed. Like I literally couldn't look at them in the eyes. I felt so guilty for being alive, and like just I didn't engage with people that were associated with 9/11. It just, I completely shut down, but that's what happened after. But I'll back to that first memory. It was because I was in a good mood and young and like kind of happy and just excited about things. And I also smoked cigarettes at the time. So I remember that. Yes. I was taking the long way around like the courtyard in between the two towers. There was a beautiful big courtyard that was like the size of a city block with a beautiful fountain, like an orb shaped something in the middle, and this beautiful fountain, and people would sit around there. And so I was like sort of, just taking my time, smoking a cigarette, sipping a coffee, walking across across that open plaza on this beautiful, like breezy, warm day. I remember my shoe, like looking down, like I was wearing slip-on shoes. Like I didn't have socks because it was September 11th, but it was still beautiful, like breezy. And I had just gotten to the glass revolving doors of the bottom of Tower 2, the South Tower. And like it all happened in 1 second. It was just like all my senses, everything was like broken. Like it went higher. It's like you turn the volume up as long, like it was the loudest explosion I ever heard. And my ears like went like pop. And from that moment until a few hours later, it was like, and when I talk about this, I try to explain to people when you put your hands over your ears and you press and then you talk, you almost do this like more when you're a kid. You sound like you're underwater when you talk like that. That's what it sounded like in a split second, because that noise was, and at the very same time, like there was heat, there was that noise. So it's like there was a man who really alerted me to it. It was like I was still in my little like dreamy, last drag of my cigarette zone. And this guy that was maybe 20 steps back to my right, he screamed, "Holy fuck!" It was so, I don't know. And then it was just like I said, I mean, it probably was a matter of a few seconds, but it felt like it all just happened at the same time. I can't explain it. He screamed. I suddenly like threw like my cup of coffee, and the noise blew out my ear. And then my body was really hot. And the man that alerted me sort of out of my dreaminess into this like moment, he must have seen the plane coming. He was crushed. It was like all in 3 seconds. He fell or was, I'm not exactly sure. And I guess it doesn't really make a difference, but sadly, he screamed and then he was silenced, and I just bolted, and I was running back towards where I came, relaxed with my cigarette and coffee, and was running like haphazardly through that open plaza, and people and it was just raining down huge pieces of
debris,
metal, I guess, or debris, whatever it was. I don't know. I don't remember seeing like papers and stuff flying that early. It was just like in the first few minutes.
Yeah, it probably hasn't reached you yet.
Right. But the pieces of metal and debris were immediately, it was just like you're running through a thunderstorm of metal or something.
Would have almost been like a video game. Yeah.
It was so, except, and the thing is, I remember that feeling of that adrenaline that my body ran and I wasn't part of it. It just, that fight or flight, my God, I was flight. And I don't know how I wasn't hit by anything. I lost my shoes, one shoe when I was running, and hurt my foot. It was like nothing. But, I didn't even stop. It just sort of zigzagged. I don't know. So again, why I think about just those first few moments is I was just in a weird spot where that was the most dangerous for me. And I ran back into the building, actually just the side of it, because there are the 2 towers and then there are smaller buildings that are sort of connected to it. I thought there was a bomb or something. I was at the base, like entering the lobby, so I didn't see it. I was at the bottom of the tower, so I ran back into the side and I collapsed on the ground, and I was like clutching the ground, and I think that was the most raw, scared, uncontrollable emotion, fear, everything, impending doom. I don't know. Like that was the most I think I felt in one moment. And also like, I don't think I ever felt like emotions like that again. Like then it took out so much energy that like I didn't feel emotions for the next like 10 years. But, so I was like that on the ground, and I was like, it was uncontrollable, and people were streaming up from the escalators under underneath the World Trade Center, where there was a whole shopping center and food and everything in the subway system, and people were coming up and rushing out through the doors to the street, and I was yelling at people like, "Don't go out there!" Thinking that was where so I'm yelling at them. Thank God no one like listens. They're just like, crazy lady on the ground. Who cares? Actually, that's not true. There were a couple people that came to my side, and it's something I'll never, ever forget. One was a man some businessman, just crouched down. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, don't go outside. There's a bomb," And I had to be actually that morning on the 90-something floor for training, for like some mandatory training. Wow. Thank God but I was so confused that I was saying to this guy, I have to get to the 4th floor for this training. And then I said, "Oh my gosh, do I have mascara all over my face?" I remember asking him that. And like, why does your brain do that? So weird. I know,
it's so crazy, isn't it?
Ugh, I'm like embarrassed. If my story is part of this guy's story, hopefully he survived, this guy who knelt down to try to help me.
And this
He'll
girl
be like,
was laying there with mascara.
Like, how's my mascara? I'm like, oh God, I'm part of that forever. But at some point, I think he was like, "Fuck this!" And he's like, "Gotta run." So, he tried to get me to go, and I just was like, it wasn't happening. So, I don't know I wish I could. That's for another day. I can think about like who that person is. But
hopefully he's even listening. He will listen.
Could you imagine?
That'd be amazing.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh, do I have mascara on my face? And so he left, and I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to stay on the floor of that building. And it wasn't until there was someone else, a woman I didn't even really know well, who worked on the 74th floor. I used to see like in passing, and she saw me, and she's this petite little cute thing, and she like grabbed me and was like, we need to leave now. And I remember also that feeling of that heat again, and like I was about to vomit, and I was like, I'm gonna throw up. And I remember her looking at me and like clutching my arm and saying, "To throw up while we run." And wow. I mean, my God, I don't know how she knew to do that or to be like that. And so she basically dragged me, and we ran out the door. And I know I'm like taking a really long time to explain this, and this was only a matter of like 10 minutes.
No, but it's good. I think it's good because it gives listeners that weren't there and that wonder about it the full picture. I also
feel like there's, even after all this time, there's so much guilt, and there's so much like I dismissed my own story for so long that I feel like I need to explain why. I even sometimes look back and be like, well, that was just 10 minutes of your life. Like, I even beat myself up over that, but I feel like,
Look, I think anyone that was there experienced it, and every story is valid,
Right. That's true. Yeah. I'm still, you've got, that's why you have a podcast, because you're wise. Yes. You've learned. I'm like, I just learned that last week. Yes. But when her name's Stephanie, and when she grabbed me and we ran out the door, the timing might be a little bit off on this, but the second, so that was the first plane that hit the South Tower. So I know it's confusing. The first plane hit Tower 2. That's where I am. And then when Stephanie kind of pulled me out the door, and I was in like that kind of distress I was in, we started to run, and we looked up, and that I did see the second plane. So I guess however the timing is at 9:02 to 9. So whatever that 15-minute like time period was when I was running. Right. I was running through the plaza, and then back into the building, and then got out, and then there was the second plane. So we saw not the entrance of but just the explosion. So again, I thought there's a bomb. I never saw a plane. I didn't hear my ear, I still couldn't really hear. And we stood there for a second right outside looking up. And I remember also thinking, I don't know why I keep saying I remember. Obviously I remember, I'm telling you this, but like, I don't know. I think I'm nervous. Sorry.
That's all right.
Looking up and thinking that my boss must be up there, that, 70, that looks like the 74th, that looks above 70 or around, And then the first building that was anyhow, sorry, I'm actually like going back and like looking up, like in my mind I was just like looking up and seeing like a ball of fire.
I
I
can
can see
imagine.
it.
I mean, look, do not apologize. I vision it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
As you're talking about it, I remember what I saw on television
right. Like
a
what you saw
million
on
miles
TV.
away, you know,
Yeah,
because I was watching it live also. But,
yeah.
you know,
It's crazy that you have like a TV version of exactly
yeah,
what my eyes
yeah.
saw. Um,
And it was
so yeah,
horrifying enough for somebody just watching it on TV. So I can't
yeah,
even
yeah.
imagine,
There are
you know.
people that are really damaged just from watching that over and over
Yeah.
again. It's like, um, yeah. So we started to see people. Well, now I know it was people jumping, but I thought it
Mm.
was, there were like, I don't know what I thought it was. Stephanie, again, this woman who just knew, just somehow she remained like kind of aware enough and putting like two and two together. That was the only time that she showed a little bit of like more fear. And she's like, oh shit. I remember her saying, I'm like, all I remember are the people that scream like the swears. And that's when she was like, run again. So that's
Wow.
when we really picked up our like running through the streets, running through like crowds. We were outside of the area of the two towers. They're still on fire. They're not down yet, and we're just like running. And I took off my glasses, which was strange also because I think like I wanted to protect my glasses, even though like I thought I was about to die. But also I think my mind, I mean, I don't know if I'm reading into my own like actions too much, but maybe I saw, the people jumping and took off my glasses, like not to see it. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know. And so anyhow, we this whole time also, and so we're running, I have one shoe because in the first minute I lost my shoe. So it was like we all suddenly remembered like, oh, we can't keep going with a barefoot, because I think I took off the other one. And we few blocks away, zigzagging through the crowds, we like run into a bodega and we grab like bottle of water and we're like sip it and throw it on us, and grab like these like plastic Chinese slippers from like just the corners, whatever it
Yeah,
was on
yeah.
like on the newspapers. And so I wore those and was able to keep running and then walking up basically 100 something blocks until I got to my apartment by like dinner time, with my apartment, which was way uptown. So basically we were probably running and we were probably maybe like in Soho or just like a number of maybe like 10-15 blocks away by when the buildings came down, but I didn't hear it. That was the weird thing, is because I couldn't hear properly. So
Yeah.
and once we saw what we saw, we also didn't turn back and like really look. So I didn't see the buildings fall and I didn't hear it. And so when it's kind of a long story that I guess that's the point of today, but I'm like, we'll skip this next part. But basically I connected with my boyfriend at the time, who then became my husband, who then became, thankfully, my ex-husband. But I was able to meet him at a certain spot, and he was the one that said like, oh my God, I like, when the buildings came down, I just thought you were gone, and I was like, what do you mean when the buildings came down? And I remember the other people that were like around like looked at me and Stephanie like,
Wow.
we didn't know. And then it was just a total, and then it was running and walking until I made it back to my apartment at like dinner time. And then it was the whole trying to get through on the phone lines and calling into, there's like an 800 number, like I'm alive, like, well, who were you with? And you have to like go through it. And so there was all of that stuff. And that was like, that was like the beginning of a blur.
That would have been so chaotic at the time too, because there were so many people involved. As you said, there's a shopping center downstairs. You've got people that were in the building. You've got people that just are walking past. I mean, absolute chaos. And I can't even imagine how the services got that organized to sort of even have a 1-800 number for you to call.
Yeah. And what else is like kind of fascinating is I don't remember that much from like the walk once we were really out of the danger area and we knew that both buildings came down. So I guess that was a matter of like a couple hours, right?
Yeah.
We were still, I mean, it took that long to get out of like running through the streets
Oh, it would have,
to get
yeah.
out of the area. And then when we were just out of that area, I remember like Park Avenue was lined with or Park Avenue South was lined with like servicemen that had these huge guns, and they were like, I don't know if this is a clear memory or not, but to me they were like lined up on the side of the street and like standing there with guns, and there's no traffic, and it's just a sea of people walking up the avenue. But I also remember thinking how strange it was that how did they appear so quickly, or maybe it was hours later, but still like how did this, like the whole army like show up? And what a weird, I mean, horrible obviously, but just the immediate aftermath was so strange.
Yeah, it would have been
so strange, like, days later, even all the way up where I lived, that there was this weird, not weird, it was just a horrible burning rubber, dead bodies, whatever, everything kind of smell that wafted like all the way up 100 blocks and like got stuck in the like vestibule between like the lobby door and I swear it's like it was really weird. But people who were in New York City at the time remember that smell, and it was just even if you weren't in that area. But yeah, so that's how I got away. I don't know why, my foot was fine. It was just and immediately I started having nightmares and was like dreaming about being stuck on something and a truck rolling down a hill and running over my foot and like these kind of things. I had a lot of foot dreams for a lot.
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah. Now I have these beautiful tattoos on my feet, all over like the top of my feet.
So amazing.
They're wildflowers because wildflowers grow from like foot breaks and cracks and things. And so now I sort of try to celebrate my feet like that, but I have like a weird non-sexual foot fetish. Like,
I think that's brilliant. I really do.
Yeah, it's really
brilliant.
weird. And like one of my things, as I know I'm jumping ahead, but one of my things as an artist now, and one of the biggest things that is still that it's been in my back of my brain for a long time, and I still haven't done it, but I will. I want to make a painting, like a really big size painting of those little Chinese slippers that I wore up 100 blocks. I have them wrapped up in plastic. I was gonna throw them out after a number of years. My dad was like, "No," and he took them. I don't want them. Yeah. And then I also they smell. They have that if you open the plastic. Yeah, it's so So I actually got them back from him, and I was thinking, all right, maybe they can serve a different purpose now, and I can sort of, I don't know. So I haven't. That was just going back to my foot, my foot thing. I'm like, I want to draw. I want to paint more. I want to paint shoes, and I want to paint feet and stuff. But
it's obviously something that you've. It's basically something that you've grabbed onto for the memory. It's serving its purpose for you.
Yeah. And there was also an element when things, post 9/11, things, PTSD developed. I was in an abusive relationship, like things, the opposite of like getting help and going in the right direction. It happened. I just went down a really bad, dark path. And I used to, if I ever had stubbed my toe or cut my foot, I'd be thrilled. I loved like the pain of like, I wanted my foot to be like cut off or something. It was just a really dark, weird, thing. So I think it's much better now that my focus is on painting the feet rather than like self-harm and all that.
This is Ants Talk.
I was going to ask you a question, and I've always battled with it myself when I've watched everything unfold with 9/11. And it's especially now that when you can go online and you can watch the footage, you can
Mm-hmm.
see videos of people's different perspectives and all that sort of stuff. What do you personally think about when people put up the videos where they say it was a controlled
Oh,
explosion and stuff like that?
honestly, I've given that very, very little thought and time and energy out of
Yeah.
there's so many. I'm not even sure that I knew that really existed for a while, because also I had an aversion to social media. I think the only thing I do, I've never signed up for Facebook, and I'm actually very proud of that. I think I'm like one of,
Keep doing it.
yes,
Stay away.
but also I have a little bit of OCD, so I know if I see something, like I'll get stuck on something. It's more for like to protect myself in that way. But and also it started like when everyone was on Facebook back in 2000, like in the early 2000s. That was like the beginning of those really dark years. I cut myself off from everyone, so there was no way I'd be online. I was barely talking to my own family, so I was like in a hole for a long time. But what was the point? Oh, so I think I missed out on a lot of that stuff that was floating around on the internet, which is odd because I would read a ton, like obsessively, about the people that were murdered. So, and especially people that were in their 20s, because I kept thinking like, a split second would have been me, or it was that, or this person. And I felt like I owe it to those other people to learn everything about them.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did more than looking at conspiracy theories and stuff. And there is a survivor I met that got a lot of attention because there's a photo of him and there's blood all over his face, and he was one of the last people to be pulled out. And he's a wonderful person and a really strong survivor, obviously. He was the one, and it was only a few years ago, that told me, oh, you probably know me. Like when I first met him, you probably know me. You've seen my picture. I'm the one that they put on all those materials that say this is fake. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I looked, and I was like, oh my God, how the perspective I look at it from is like, I think about this man who, oh my God, his most awful moment, like captured and photographed, and then to
Being
used like that is so devastating. It's also so like takes away it's just so awful. And so that's how I looked at that. I never even gave and if I meet people that I just feel like sick to my stomach, if I just walk away from people really that are like, the devil is I don't know, there's when I volunteered, it's so crazy. And I a few years ago, like when I had my renaissance, as I like to say, like when I woke up from my coma of a decade, I also started volunteering at the World Trade Center Tribute Center. It's run by family members or survivors direct. So the people that give tours of the museum or talk are all directly connected.
So is that the current one that I would have visited when I was over there just recently?
Well, there are two. It's strange. They're like, I think eventually they'll be merged or something. But there's the one that's the main museum that's underground.
Yeah, that's
that
the
has that's the World Trade, the memorial. That is.
We didn't cope very well in there. My husband and I went down, and I think we were there for all of 10 minutes. And he literally had a panic attack and said, "I can't be in here. I have to leave."
Oh my God, I want to talk to your husband. I had a panic attack when I was there too.
Yeah, to me, it was, how do I put it? Even though it was there for a memorial, I just felt it was a little odd that at the end of it, there was a gift store. I didn't like the fact that remember we were talking about that smell. I could almost smell that still. It was such a haunting experience.
Haunting, that's exactly what it is. The thing that everyone's going to have their own opinion, obviously, and I think that the things that maybe you and I may have been turned off by, someone else may have been like, oh, that opens my eyes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just remember. Oh, and by the way, this the survivor that was used for that propaganda. He also volunteers there, and he does such a wonderful service, and really, like, anyhow, yeah, for me, when I went there, I only went there once, and it was a few years ago. And I definitely had a panic attack in the bathroom. Oddly, I took a photo of myself while I was in that. This is really strange. This is like when I knew that I was sort of going to do this art stuff again, but I hadn't actually done it yet. It was just like in my head percolating sort of. And I don't do the social media thing. I don't do the selfies, but I started taking all these like photos of myself during this time when I started to come alive again. So when I had these emotions, or was crying or was shaking or whatever, which literally, like, I was just dead for so long in a bad place before that I had this idea to like document it. I think it was like, oh my gosh, I'm having these feelings. And number two, like, I want to look at this and analyze this. Yeah. And I don't know.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because as you know, my mum just recently passed away. On the day that she did pass, I took a photo of myself too.
Yeah.
I was actually walking along the beach, and it was, I suppose it was something like, I thought, I want to remember this moment.
Yes. Yeah. Whether it's to reflect back, or because it was painful and you think you should remember how that moment of pain felt, or, it's just interesting. I mean, it's not to share with them. It's more like it's documenting something that is just a really important moment that's going to pass.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
And I think for me, that was an important moment that I, finally, after all these years, went to the 9/11 museum, had a panic attack. The thing I didn't like was, I mean, I think as a survivor, when I was there with like the half crushed, fire truck and stuff, it just, that wasn't, that I understand is good for maybe for people to, and also in a few years, or people that weren't even around on 9/11, to understand like how real and how big. I mean, I guess you have to like stick something in someone's face. For me, the thing that was really disturbing was like listening to the recordings of the voicemails, those things. And it's like, I remember that they were playing something on a speaker. I don't remember exactly, but that was the thing that I was just like, okay, I think I'm going to leave now.
Yeah. Because I remember actually listening to those, because they were also on YouTube. And I did it in a way of, I suppose I got a little obsessed with it all, because as you know, I'm obsessed with New York. And when it all happened, I wanted to watch and listen and learn everything about it. And hearing those voicemails was just,
oh my God,
heartbreaking. So to hear them again in that museum, I was like, I can't even go in here. Sorry.
Right. I was the same way with the way I was obsessed with learning about the people that died, learning about their stories. And so, yes, I listened to all those messages too and cried every single time. And, it's sort of like a self-punishment also. I mean, I think we are very aware, and, we are both part of, living through this. And so I think we're probably not extraordinary in the fact that we were fascinated with this bizarre, horrible, and all those, like, listening to see how real it was when people are saying, I think there's smoke in here, and all of that stuff. But, also I think we weren't as accustomed to these sort of movie-like, horrible, like apocalyptic things happening, where now, sadly, so I think then it was like it wasn't part of our conscious. We couldn't even put our minds or like.
It really did awaken us, I think, as humans, to the nastiness of humans.
Yeah.
And the horrible thing is it then opened the floodgates for people just to do it every day now.
Yeah. And I think that makes it easier for conspiracy theories and things like that to kind of fly around. And I just didn't, like, again, I didn't even know that it was a thing. And I don't even have the energy to like entertain any of that. But like you said,
well, sorry, continue.
Oh, I was just going to say that, you were saying it opened our eyes to sort of the evil in the world. And one thing I have to say is my father's parents were Holocaust survivors. They met in a refugee displaced persons camp in Germany after both being surviving the end of the war and being liberated from concentration camps. My grandmother had the tattoo number on her forearm. She was liberated from Auschwitz. And my grandparents met like I said, in a displaced persons camp, got married, had their first son there, still in Germany, and they finally made it to the US. And so my father has this experience of growing up as the son of survivors, which is a very unique experience. And so I grew up sort of understanding that there was evil, kind of like from a really early age, but it was hard to access. I mean, I guess the same way that people needed to listen to the voicemails on 9/11 to understand like how real it was. I think I, as a kid, like I always, my grandparents as Holocaust survivors was a big deal. And I knew it from an early age, but yet, and then I was sort of fascinated with it, but couldn't really understand. And then, so even in that, I guess I'm trying to make a connection. I think that maybe there is no connection. I struggled with this for a long time too, when I sort of started to think about getting well and getting into a better mindset about moving forward. But I took a lot of time like thinking about my grandparents and what they went through, and then what I went through as a survivor and evil in the world. And I think I'm like trying to like make something connect that doesn't, but
I suppose in a way that it also gave you a bit of strength to, to move on and carry on.
First, it was a lot of guilt. First, there was like, there's war and there's famine and there's the Holocaust and my grandparents, and that's years. And I go back to my story, and about that first 20 minutes that I thought, I was gone, and what I saw are people gone around me, but it was 20 minutes. And so I've spent a really long time minimizing like my pain and trauma, because I feel like, well, these are, now I'm in a place where I can understand sort of all angles and be like, each trauma is different. Like the Holocaust is the Holocaust. Like stop trying to make nothing's,
Yeah, but I mean, if anything, it proves that even 20 minutes of your life can be life-changing.
Yeah, exactly.
And affect you for the rest of your life.
Right. And so now I think that's sort of less like shocking that these moments, and now I feel like everybody has been connected to a mass shooting or some environmental like
catastrophe
and something. And it's just, so I almost think like when I talk about 9/11, even though I have to remind myself that not everyone, that people don't know the details, and it's interesting or helpful to hear from someone who survived about the stories. But I sort of look at the opportunity to talk to you and other people more as, if I can help, these people, anyone that, or everyone is basically affected by some sort of trauma these days, that I, in telling my story, it's more the aftermath of 9/11 that I would want people to also remember, that I spent like 10 years like dead. And I don't want other people to do that, because they think that, because their pain wasn't as long and torturous as somebody in the Holocaust, that they don't deserve to get better and to, so
that was what I wanted to touch on was, when did you make that decision, and what was sort of your first steps of coming out of it and going and seeking help?
Well, I think I really was convinced at the time that I was, there were two things. I was convinced like I was fine, even though I really wasn't. And I had nightmares and insomnia, and all the literally PTSD was like almost within the first few weeks. And that kind of thing can be caught and helped and, redirected, but I didn't, I did everything that you shouldn't do. I sort of isolated myself. I really got sucked into those PTSD symptoms. I married the boyfriend at the time, who was a terrible person, but something happened where, I was just so broken that like I don't know. And so I think my point is that things just got so, maybe this is like you can guess that this is how it happened, but it was just like there was no more there wasn't anywhere else to go. It wasn't going to get any worse. It was just bottom. It was just, so the bad coping skills and drinking and doing whatever and isolating and beating myself up and having, accepting this kind of behavior from my husband, believing when he would tell me like I was crazy or, and he was doing all sorts of terrible things and like fucking with my head. And I believed this because he was the only I thought, and he sort of convinced me that he was the only person that could, I could rely on and whatever.
I'm the only person that's going to deal with you. Yeah.
Yes. It was terrible. So that makes it even worse, where I'm even more guilty and embarrassed about what I'm feeling. So basically it got to where it couldn't get worse, where, the shit that he was doing, sorry, I just can't help it.
Swear away.
All right. The fucking bullshit that this guy did, I couldn't even believe it, that, in my state. But so when it was basically in my face and also physically, I was just so ill. I was either eating too much, drinking too much, not eating. Like I was just physically. And then, the one thing that I had, which was this husband, it was basically like he was standing over me with he did not do this, but I'm just trying to illustrate. Like he's standing over me with a knife and he's like, are you not convinced that I'm about to, it was it had to be that much in my face that I was like physically and emotionally and whatever, like sick at a breaking point where I realized like I couldn't basically function. I had to, and it's a weird place to be in where that happens to you. It wasn't like I was so strong, was like, I'm going to get help. It was like, there was nothing else.
If I don't get help, I don't know what will happen.
Right. And so I like wandered into some emergency room by myself. Like no one knew I did this. This was, I think, in 2010. And I couldn't even express what was wrong. I was so traumatized. And this is 2010. So it's like walking into a place being like, 9/11. And they're like, what are you talking about? And so I finally was sort of redirected to the World Trade Center Health Clinic, which I don't know if you've seen on the news how Jon Stewart had done a big talk in front of U.S. Congress about extending the medical treatment for its survivors.
That's so good though.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was like the first responders who now have this crazy high incidence of cancer from cleaning up on that pile for so long. That's what they call it. They called it the pile. I don't know if that was like a New York thing or like you guys knew that, but so I didn't know that existed, that resource. And then I went there. Oh my God. And it was like, they understood me. I feel like it's odd because I don't really get that emotional about, but I kind of feel emotional about this. It's just that I remember going there after going from like hospital ER to this other place and no one could understand what I was saying, and like getting to this place where they had a multidisciplinary team. So they had a social worker, they had psychology, they had actual like breathing pulmonologists, and they were all there to work together to look at each patient like as a whole. And the only patients they have are 9/11 survivors and first responders. And they understood, like when I could barely form a sentence. Like,
well, they literally set you free again.
Yes. Yes. And then they were sort of responsible for, like, I started going there for therapy and stuff. Unfortunately, I couldn't really get into the trauma stuff so much because I was in such a state of crisis that they actually like helped me. Well, besides helping me like get on medication and therapy and whatever, I never did anything like regularly. It took a long time to like really get into the right healing, but they helped me through like that dark crisis I was in. So to get out of that marriage, and that, this was all really horrible stuff that was like, it was basically how to clear the shit like that was right in front of me. And they helped for those first few years. That was like 2012, 13. And then I was really free from the immediate crisis of like that dark place I had landed in after so long, that then it was like the beginning of the healing that I probably should have been at that point in like 2003, but instead it was 2013. And that's okay. Now I can say it's okay. Even then I was like, I really teetered on sort of what the value of my life is and this sort of thing. And, you know, you just go somewhere that's so,
Oh, I bet.
so terrible. And then, yeah, so I'm still sort of, I mean, I'm out of the marriage. I'm out
Hooray.
of, yes, thank God. And single.
Any
And
listeners?
yes. Hello, anyone with that nice accent? I heard that the my friend who lives in Australia told me, okay, now I'm gonna embarrass, I won't say her name. Even though I have only one friend that lives in well, that's you, because I have you.
You know
But,
who you are.
you know who you are. She told me that the like maintenance men who come fix your, like when they're called
Your pipes.
yeah. Yes, exactly. But the literal physical metal pipes.
Tradies.
Yes, that's what they're called. I
Yeah.
just learned this like 2 months ago, and they wear short shorts.
Yep. But not all of them are attractive, I'll just let you know.
Oh, is that true?
Some of those tradies will turn up and they're probably 50 kilos over.
Ruining my fantasy.
And then the crack shows. So they call it plumber's crack.
Well,
so when they're actually under your sink, all you can see is their bum crack hanging out the shorts.
Well, the bum crack thing, that's more like around here, like a big guy with a bum crack, like, ugh. But,
no, but some of them are delightful.
Sorry. I just mean that my friend said that there are, so I like to keep that in. Anyhow, what is
but but I'm going back to that point. There are really some hot ones. There's actually, I think, even on Instagram, or there was a website that you could go to, and there's pictures of hot tradies, yeah.
Is it like demeaning to call someone a tradie?
No, because so basically what it is, they're men that have learnt a trade.
Oh, duh,
yeah.
Trade. Okay.
Yeah. So they've learned a trade of plumbing.
My mind is like,
yeah.
I help you, you help me. Let's make a trade. All right.
I love it.
Oh, it's so funny. Oh my gosh. Yes. So maybe I should paint a tradie.
There you go. New artwork evolved from the podcast.
There's inspiration everywhere I turn.
I love it.
But you know, that is actually what I was doing when in this new, like I said, renaissance. What's happening now is, like, as I'm figuring out what I want to do and who I want to be, or not who I want to be, I am who I am. So how I want to better myself, I'm seeing like inspiration ideas everywhere that seem like regular, like not really big deals to other people, like the dog or the tradie. But to me, it's like signifies so much about, like, I'm opening my eyes, I'm talking to new people, I'm learning this.
Well, you've seen my artwork. Mine comes the same way. It's purely from, it just hits me and I've got to create it. I don't know what
weird,
it is.
Right?
There's actually a politician here in Australia who everyone hates, and she turned up to Parliament in a burqa.
Oh,
the weird thing is, because she she was making a point because she dislikes anyone Muslim. And
oh my God, I was like, wow, that's great. She's trying to show like anyone can wear it.
No,
it was the opposite.
The polar opposite. But the weird thing is I actually created an artwork around that about 3 weeks before she did it.
Really?
Yeah, it was like a premonition. It was absolutely bizarre. I created this art piece, and then 3 weeks later, she's turning up to Parliament in this burqa, and I'd actually put her in a burqa and everything.
Oh my God.
It was so surreal. So yeah, inspiration comes from everywhere. It's important.
It does. And then it feels like the process of creating whatever it is that you feel like you need to, it's like an itch you need to scratch.
Yeah.
I think it's like that selfie I took a few years ago in the bathroom of the 9/11 memorial. Oh, I just have to explain that feeling. I don't know if just for anyone that has PTSD out there, my PTSD pals, that feeling that like suddenly someone screamed and you almost shit your pants. Yeah. That's the feeling that like shock, like suddenly like, holy shit. Like I get that wave, that feeling multiple times a day still. Wow. Like I'm able to recover from it quickly. And there are things, it's like when I had a conventional job, someone would tap me on the shoulder or something, and I was like had earphones in or was typing something, and I would jump or scream, like have that like rush of like holy. And I know people would laugh, and I'm like, oh,
crazy. So was there a way of support or compensation or anything like that that allowed you to continue living and stuff like that for any of the victims?
Not, it's really complicated. It's, so I remember, I keep doing that. I remember, I think I'm like buying time in my brain being like, calm down, it's okay. Maybe it was a year later or something. I was still working for Morgan Stanley. I stayed with them for a couple years because I don't know, it felt like my small team, like together, they were the only other ones that kind of, I don't know. I didn't really, I couldn't think beyond day to day. So I just sort of was plugging along. And they sent us like the Bruce Springsteen album, like the CD, the one that he made that he wrote after 9/11.
Right.
And they sent it to us and a check for like $500 or something. And it was so weird. I remember and a pen that said like extraordinary times, extraordinary people. And it rubbed me the wrong way. I don't think I stayed that much longer there. It was so weird. So there was no, I think, and I didn't know to look into any sort of, so, I kept working until I couldn't work anymore. And only recently, like a few years ago, when I sort of like was at my bottom, did I understand that I could explore some, workers' compensation or things from way back then. But it's not like there was, I am 1,000,000% grateful that the World Trade Center Health Clinic exists.
Yeah.
That I get my prescription drugs through them, and I can see, a variety of doctors through them at no cost to me. But that's it. Like there isn't it's not like you trip on the sidewalk and you sue the city and you get $5 million. Like there isn't anything else,
But I've noticed that with insurance and workers' comp and stuff like that, they don't really love letting people know what's actually available.
Exactly. Yes.
It's like, we'll tell you about that when you've literally gotten to the brinking point. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'll be honest, I was hospitalized for 7 days, maybe.
Yeah.
It was just like at basically everything that you can imagine. All my bad coping, like I did like on one night. Like, I'm not sure I'm going to survive to the morning. And then I went to, it was sort of a planned emergency room visit that I stayed in and tried to recalibrate medicine and stop drinking and stuff for a little while and whatever. So it was like you said, it was until literally the very breaking point that I had to, that's when it wasn't that I wanted money or something. It was like, I couldn't afford to pay for a hospital stay. That's when I started researching like how do I do this? And I mean, the shit that they make you go through, and it makes me so sad for any other, not necessarily terror just any trauma survivors, just the people and the insurance and all this stuff. Like, why do they beat you up and so it's just so heartless how they dismiss and question.
The hardest thing too is that they're making you go and do this stuff when you're at your worst point.
Yes.
It's sort of like, just recently my mother passing away and then literally 2 days later having to start to organize a funeral and make decisions. It's like, you're literally at the worst point of your life and they're wanting you to make a decision about the color of a coffin or something.
Right.
And it's like
anything's gonna it's like you don't have your faculties to, and I went, the insurance company had a doctor that talked to me, and his report after he talked to me was so infuriating. It was so victim shaming. It was so upsetting. And like, I mean, he just put a lot of blame on it. It was just basically confirming a lot of the horrible self-doubt and self-hatred sort of stuff that I had dealt with privately for so many years. So, but anyhow, I got through that. I didn't even need all the doctors, everyone was like, this is one of the, like, she checks every single box for PTSD, like every single symptom. So there was no argument over like what, had happened to me. It was just going through that and recounting stuff and having someone question,
Oh, I bet.
That's why
Sorry, what
Oh, I
would
was just going
be?
to say that's why we talk about it now.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's,
Because I think it's so essential and so important to talk about because it's not only healing for you, but it's also, as I mentioned before, it's leaving that it's leaving a legacy and a memory of the people that did, that were victims and did perish on that horrid day.
yeah.
What would be your final thoughts that you'd like people to know, listeners to know about that whole story?
I think people are going to take away whatever they're going to take away from different like snapshots of the story, whether they didn't know really the story of 9/11 or what it felt like when you were, so aside from all that, what like individuals like filling in the blanks of something they didn't know, something that I just want to make sure and I want to leave the message is that I don't think my whole story had to be the way it turned out. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time looking back and being like, I should have done, but if there is a little bit of a moral to the story, it's possible that I could have been redirected and that the PTSD that I live with still, that I'm aware of, and it's really frustrating because I don't feel so, anyhow, it's such a drag that that's still a thing. Yeah. But I hope that people from this whole story understand that, if there's some sort of earlier intervention, and unfortunately now there are so many terrible things that are just more frequent and they seem like video games with shootings and everything. And, so maybe this is happening, I'm not sure, but if people have access to some mental health, the right kind of support and help and direction early on, that is such a deterrent from, one thing. And so that's, I guess, the early help is one thing that I would want people to understand, that I didn't have that. And that's part of what happened. And also just to be able to talk about sort of these terrible things that happen to us, but also how we handle them. And usually we're, we can be embarrassed about all these things. And I'm an open book now. So the other message I would want to leave people is to be more open themselves, or know that like, I'm doing it like other people. It's cool. You can talk about your trauma. I agree. And if we do that, it will encourage people to maybe have that earlier intervention type of thing. I'm quite happy to be open and vulnerable. Yes. I think that it's the best way not only to warm people to you, but it also gives them an opportunity to be vulnerable also. And I think that's what we need right now on this planet, because oh my God, everyone's just trying to be the bravado and the big tough guy, and we look amazing on Instagram and all that sort of stuff, all the bravado that's out there, when really we're all just battling through life. We really are. Which is why I have on my Instagram paintings and drawings of myself looking all contorted and crying. Like, this but your art's amazing. Actually, do you want people to have a look? Mention your Instagram. Go, tell them. It's embarrassing because I didn't do social. Okay, it's Becky_Foxy. That's my dog. FOXY _art. I feel like this is like such a like an older person who doesn't know technology being like, Becky Foxy art. No, not at all. God, have you seen some of the names out there? Oh my God, I was like tormenting myself over that, and then I realized no one fucking cares. I actually had to laugh yesterday because I'm part of an exhibition in September this year, and one of the artists, because I was tagged in it, another artist has then started following me on Instagram, and I had to laugh at her name. I just got my period. No! That's so good! I know, I love it. And on that note, I'm going to let you go because because I just got my period. And I could talk to you all day. I seriously could. I find you so... Me too. Don't go, please. I know. But we will let the listeners go at least. Okay.
And I thank you so much, Becky. I really, really appreciate you
Thank you
talking
for
to us.
talking to me, and I just sending so much love to everyone in Australia.
Thank you.
Especially the one who told me about the tradesies.
I love it. All right, darling. We'll speak soon.
Okay,
Ants Talk.
definitely.
It's like
Thank
Oprah,
you.
but not.